So welcome everyone. I'm coming to you today from Ghana lands in Adelaide, and I acknowledge the lands from which you're all joining the call today, and acknowledge the Aboriginal people whose lands we live and work on. So thank you so much for attending, whether you're attending in person, it's lovely to have you here, and if you're watching this recording, thank you for taking the time to watch the recording. I am going to keep it very brief because the main purpose of today's meeting is to hear from a long-time FreddyMatch user, and that is Brad Cooper, the CEO of Volunteering Gold Coast. And we are delighted to have Brad on the call because Brad can give you a genuine, warts and all description of the FreddyMatch journey. And that is the intention of this call. This is not a sales pitch. This is a chance for you to hear from somebody who's used the platform, what they think of it. And then afterwards, we can always talk about next steps. So a little bit about FreddyMatch for those of you who don't know me and don't know our story. FreddyMatch is a charity, and the charity is called the Freddie Bear Foundation. We're a registered charity, and we were set up in memory of my son Freddie, who passed away when he was very small. And after Freddie passed away, like many people who experience a tragedy or a significant life event, I was really keen to get back out there and do some volunteering and, give something back and put something good back out to the community who'd supported me so much through that journey. And when I did try and find a volunteer role, I found it very difficult to do so. And I was honestly a little depressed about the process and the way in which volunteering was advertised online. And because of that, I sort of set out on a small personal mission to begin with, which has turned into, now a business, but still supported by not only employees, but wonderful volunteers, to try and make volunteering that little bit easier, to try and make it more engaging for people to volunteer, and to really improve the digital channel that volunteers do come through. So about us as an organisation, our vision, our lofty goal is a global community where everyone volunteers for an hour a week every week. So we return to this state where people are actively engaging in their community and they are excited to do so. And the way that we do this is through our technology. And our technology is not intended as a replacement for the personal connection that is so important in volunteering. It is intended to support organisations that either work with volunteers directly or work with each other to support the cause of volunteering, to help them engage volunteers more efficiently and more effectively, and to overall increase the number of volunteers participating in volunteering. Our values: innovation, community, contribution and hope, which kind of ties it all together. And welcome to everyone who's just joined. I'm just talking a little bit about FreddyMatch, and any questions you have, you can always pop in the chat or ask me afterwards. So what is FreddyMatch? So many people think of FreddyMatch as simply a volunteer recruitment platform, but in fact we also have quite extensive volunteer management functionality. So we truly are an end-to-end volunteer management system, but with a difference, because FreddyMatch is centered around the volunteer experience. For us, the most important person in this whole thing is the volunteer, and we want to get them, when they're sitting on Google typing in volunteering and thinking about volunteering, at that moment we want to capture their attention and get them in front of the roles that are going to make them say yes to volunteering. And then we have the management tools to help you guide the volunteer through the rest of the process in a kind of smooth and seamless way that doesn't make them lose interest. So we really are a volunteer-focused platform, and that is very, very important. And I think that is particularly important to those of you, especially in volunteer resource centres, because volunteers are your bread and butter, and you want to kind of capture them while they're enthusiastic. And, in this time where we're all stretched for resources, to have that process being efficient is very important. So we help achieve your vision by finding you the volunteers you need and saving you time and resources. And we're very proud of the statistic that 90% of organisations that subscribe to FreddyMatch actually find volunteers through our platform, which is awesome. So why choose FreddyMatch? 3 simple things. 1, we help you achieve your vision. We're a charity ourselves. We were built by volunteers, and we understand how important volunteers are. We find volunteers that you need through our platform and our unique way of matching volunteers with roles. We find volunteers that have their skills and interests aligned with the roles. And finally, we save you time and resources. And Brad will talk more to this later, so I won't dwell on it, but we save time for every volunteer application you process. So I just thought I'd put a little bit more about us so you can see some faces to the name. What is our commitment to you? So we are an Australian platform and a registered charity, and we are specifically created to find organisations like volunteer resource centres and also, councils and larger charities to find and manage volunteers. Our platform was co-designed with fellow Australian charities. Brad, very central to that process, which I'm sure he'll talk more to. And we take privacy and security very seriously. All our data is hosted on shore, and our platform meets the highest standards of cybersecurity. And finally, as I said, we are also a charity. We understand how important volunteers are, and we are committed to helping you and your organisation succeed. And those lovely pictures are our team, all of whom you'll probably meet at some stage in your interaction with FreddyMatch. So what Brad will talk about today is FreddyMatch Manager. This is, as I mentioned, the complete volunteer management solution. Tools taking you along the full volunteer journey. The Volunteering Gold Coast co-designed this platform, so it is really, I suppose in the initial stages it was intended for use by volunteer resource centres, but we have certainly branched out to a number of different users. And there's more features. I'm not going to talk about these. This is not a demo, but yeah, afterwards I'll give you my contact details so you can get in touch to find out more. And without further ado, passing over to Brad for the user journey. And thank you so much, Brad, in advance for being here today. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Can you show me how I could share my screen, Roxanne?
Yes. So at the bottom there is a square with an arrow pointing upwards. Yep. And if you click that, you'll be able to share your screen.
Okay, wonderful. All right, let's see how we go. There we go. So really excited to be able to share a bit of the story here. It's one of these topics that keeps coming up in my professional world here, which is what exactly have we been doing in the FreddyMatch space? How's it been going? As Roxanne indicated, it's been a journey that we've been on for a little while now. So I joined Volunteering Gold Coast in 2021, and it was really clear that my predecessor and our board had been engaged in having some discussion with Roxanne and FreddyMatch. As an organisation, like many VRCs, we've always had this big focus on trying to understand what the capabilities and opportunities are that exist right in the region where we are. And I'm going to say it's both fate and luck, and maybe some good management and looking around. It meant that our board and FreddyMatch had connected through some different through some different opportunities. So when I came into the organisation, the state of the organisation was very much that traditional VRC of running a strongly in-person program, which we all understand the strengths of. So please don't take that as a disparaging comment at all. And an organisation really struggling with the experience that they were having with using Victor as a legacy system. So my observations were that the organisation was delivering opportunities that were heavily focused on VIOs presenting the roles that they needed out to the community, and having, I'll use my little book here as a prompt, having volunteers potentially see the system that they're looking at like a teledex and flicking through to try and figure out which opportunity actually spoke to them. So very traditional view, VIOs needed something, the community needs you to do this, will you kind of take it on? So in our world as an organisation, we were quite poorly advanced in terms of thinking about what a digital solution might look like for volunteering that was different to Victor, and what a volunteer-centred and potentially self-directed opportunity would look like. So I got to join the conversation that the board had started and met Roxanne, and it became really apparent that this was going to be a solution which was going to give us this volunteer-centric piece for us. So the pivot point here is roles in the Teledex being replaced with this idea of, as an individual, what interests me, and then how does everything match to what my interests are. So we particularly like the idea that the system continues to learn. It has some algorithm learning behind it, which brings together the experiences of many volunteers to suggest things which are actually sitting within your group of opportunities for volunteers to be able to take up, and it builds that knowledge up. So that was probably the starting piece, the genesis of a conversation that got to take place. And as Roxanne mentioned, being a VRC, both of us being located on the Gold Coast, it was an opportunity to actually come together and sit in the same room and talk about what the experience is for volunteers coming into our organisation, but also to look at what the experience is for people who support volunteers as they come through our organisation. And part of our journey was to build out a volunteer journey and to look at the time and effort and cost that out. And before we went into using the platform, we were spending on average about 12 hours supporting a volunteer from being identified through to being screened and interviewed and processed and placed in that sense. And we anticipated that with the use of the platform that we'd be able to make some significant changes in that. And we have. We now still run a mix of online and in-person experiences for volunteers, for people who want the in-person experience. So we don't necessarily mandate that they have to come through that. There are some roles where it might be a preference or a requirement from a VIO that we do that in-person piece. So that's more of a choice design piece. We don't mandate it for everyone that they have to come through that space. And I'm pleased to report that our 12 hours is now down to an average of around about 3 hours to move people through. And that includes, all those different touch points that I mentioned with. So from a volunteer experience, that's a significant improvement to actually be able to move forward. For those people who are able to find and navigate a pathway themselves to take the journey and go all the way through, we're not hindering that process for them. We're not encumbering them with just steps that are there because we think they're important. They're kind of following that all the way through. And I think that's quite meaningful. It's really interesting for many VRCs. If, like us, you're probably blessed with volunteers who want to come in and actually help you run your organisation, right? And this is a really important piece for us, which is we want volunteers to have meaningful work while they're in here with us, meaningful purpose. But we also need to make sure that they are being part of a journey of redesigning the process and understanding that for those people who can navigate and find that journey themselves, that we should let them do it. It's meant that we've been able to pick up that time that's been released from volunteers and put it into other activities, whether that's training for volunteers, training for VIOs, training for volunteer managers. We haven't lost that capability and support from the volunteers that sit on our roster to help us run our VRC. In fact, I was having a look at the roster this morning with our team, and our roster is as healthy and the same size as it would have been probably 2 or 3 years ago. In any case, so that's a really positive thing for us to be able to report and feedback. So we also perform the function here of being a VIO. We recruit volunteers ourselves to run our community transport business. If I think of the last fortnight, we would have had 90 volunteer drivers involved in our organisation, plus ACVVS visitors, plus an accessible beach program for people with a disability getting into the water, right? So on any given fortnight, we're running and touching base with around about 160 volunteers. And I guess we get to experience the system from the idea of not only what a VRC looks like, but also what a VIO might do in terms of their experience and interaction with that as well. And I think that's been really helpful. That's one of the things that's quite unique about sitting in that VRC space. A little bit of indication around some of the volume that we've had going on. So yes, we've seen the same sort of dips in terms of volunteering that people have seen, but in the last 12 months, our volunteer numbers are up about 20% on the previous year. Our organisations are up about 25% on the previous year, and our volunteer opportunities that we've been supporting have been up by 50% on the previous year. Right, so and keep in mind that's all additional activity that we've been supporting without actually increasing any of our staffing base or effort that's kind of gone into that. And, we think that we could probably double those numbers again without necessarily having to reach in and adjust many of our volunteer numbers. And that, for us, that would bring us pretty much close back to the previous highs that we would have experienced as a VRC in terms of throughput. So it's serving us well. It's coping with volume. It's well adjusted in terms of our model of letting people have that straight through pathway, having a hybrid pathway, or letting people see from our website how they can jump in and out and potentially make a choice about whether they want to come straight through the pathway or come through that sort of facilitated journey. I'm just going to click on the website. I just want to show you how it sits in our website and how easy it is for a volunteer to come and find their way through. So lovely photo here of our Gold Coast Volunteer Awards, November 29th. Come and get your tickets. It's a great reason to have a tax-deductible trip up to the Gold Coast. Under our volunteer tab, we still promote our own programs up front and those that we run through our VRC members, being the left and right side of the screens here. And we have a little bit of a promotion around our internal roles that are done on volume for us here. So drivers, CVS visitors, and accessible beach roles as well that sit in there. So this is sitting quite nicely in amongst the things that we've always done. And then if I come up here and look at our partner programs, this is where we're jumping out of our site and quite seamlessly into the FreddyMatch site here. So one of the things that we really were looking for in terms of a solution was, as we said, being volunteer-centric, being able to match the profile and preferences of people who want to volunteer. So people coming through here very quickly and easily build a profile for themselves that they then start getting matched against. And they can then begin to either search via a map. So there's a spatial view of, hey, I want to volunteer in these sorts of areas. Or they can set it based on, dates and particular areas of interest that kind of sit down in here. So for the Gold Coast is a really interesting case study. You might think, oh, well, that spatial view, why is that really important? Think of the number of people who would come to volunteer here on the Gold Coast. Think of the potential of volunteer tourism going forward, and think of the idea of someone who says, when I click here on the map, and I zoom into the map, that they can actually match this search to an area where they're staying and say, look, I'd really be interested in doing some volunteer tourism through my stay. So that spatial feature is going to become more and more a part of the way in which people want to navigate. It's also important for people who might be, grey nomads touring around, wanting to pre-plan about what they might want to do, that they can think about where they are relative to those different opportunities. So, we find those features quite useful. I'll tell you one of the little challenges that sits in here so you can ensure that you're getting a bit of a balanced view of things. So we sit right here in Miami, which is here where I am. It's a great part of the world. And if I click here on Miami and it pulls up the suburb, you'll see, if I click on this spiral that sort of flicks out. Okay. And this is all of your VIOs who've put up roles that are linked into Miami without having a specific address in it. So, there's a great opportunity as the product evolves to see those things spread out far more around the exact locations where people are. And this is a great example because, a lot of these are our roles that we've got ourselves kind of running. So we kind of sit in that spiral. So there's a few things there that can certainly, as the product evolves, will come online. The map features something that's come up in the last sort of 6 to 12 months as part of an example of where the evolution of the product has kind of come from and where it's headed. And it's great, as I said, to sort of see those things pop up and help volunteers find their way. So in the VRC space, people have often heard me talk about one of our great successes has been getting out of Victor. So not our primary motivation, but one of our strong motivations in terms of selecting an alternative was to ensure that the information that we were putting into this space wasn't necessarily going to be going through replicated on our Peaks website and counted in their data for their activity. We actually thought that was quite an unfair situation that was going on for VRCs. So early on, I went through a process which was to reach out to Victor and ask them to give us an extract of all of our data. So we were successful in getting an extract of I think it's 28,000 lines of data that came out from our journey with Victor, so that we held on to that. And I know that there are other people around the country who've been trying that recently, and that's a bit of a challenge, but I would encourage you to keep going with that. If anyone is looking to do that and you want to reach out and hear how we did it, we're happy to kind of share what our process was in that space. But that data came back to us, and it gave us enough of a minimum data set to be able to build up a profile of different roles and members to be able to then invite to enroll in using the platform. So probably took us, I'm going to say 2 weeks to maybe get our data out of Victor, with a little bit of careful positioning around language as to why it was our data and not Victor's data. And that worked really well. And then Roxanne and her team certainly helped us to look at the quality of what our data was and to get it ready to go into that space. So that was a huge feature. There was a process that we went through that was supported by Roxanne and the team in terms of working with our VIOs, with our member organisations, to help them to actually set up the profile that they have. And from a volunteer point of view, you can see just looking on the screen that the tiles are relatively consistent. It's really easy to have a look and see where the co-branding elements kind of sit between which organisations being represented and the sorts of features that sit in there. So it's a user-friendly view in terms of presenting people with information that's in a very similar style and format. In different circumstances, I'd click on the different elements on the left-hand side that you can start to filter things down and just show you how it narrows down to what are those opportunities that kind of sit in there at the moment. The system's really handling lots of volume, so in the last 12 months, it certainly helped us to handle just under 1,700 applications. And one of the things that we would lose track with Victor a little bit was trying to see what the outcome was for people. And that's still a little bit of a challenge. One of the challenges is getting your VIOs to complete things at their end and show that full journey of a volunteer. But, one of the reports that I've run recently showed that there was exactly 400 volunteers that I could see that had been accepted into different roles, and we can start to track and pull down that data. When we think about our own websites, if you're talking to your marketing teams or looking at different marketing seminars, one of the things that you want to do is you want to have a strong amount of time that people actually stay on your website before they bounce out, right? In that sense. And I've heard people who've been celebrating the idea that they're getting, a minute 30, 2 minutes, 3 minutes in those sorts of spaces. And again, as we look at the data that comes from the system back to us, we can see that the average user is spending just over 7 minutes when they engage with the platform and are looking at different roles and functions. So, that's a really proud number when we look at what we've been creating in terms of experience. And as a VRC, that goes all the way back to where our VIO members sit. So, coaching them to make sure that they've got authentic images up here. There's a really low use of stock images from our VIOs. That there's a particular way of trying to write the introduction to the volunteering role, which is important from a VRC point of view. So again, it has a degree of consistency, but it gives that repetition gives a bit of comfort to volunteers as they work their way through. And we know that volunteers might potentially scroll through lots of pages and opportunities before they pick something. But that 7 minutes means that they're actually staying and they're really quite engaged. So yeah, that's a huge outcome from that perspective. And I don't know that Viv has been able to join on the call, but Viv, who's one of our colleagues, she's been a real big advocate of of the research work that they've done out of Eastern Volunteers, and that talks strongly to the idea that, navigation and finding a volunteering opportunity is often the single biggest hurdle that people who want to volunteer experience. And I think that's come up in some of the state of volunteering reports as well as a key reason. So this consistency, this profile matching, this algorithm, which is, and it's not, don't hear algorithm and think this is like a shopping algorithm. This is a far more sophisticated algorithm, which is looking at people's interests, what their experience looks like, what the rest of the population who've had a similar pathway looks like, and more around that, builds out to help come across this navigation challenge in that sense. We've had a couple of. I'll share a couple of learnings with you. We still see some strong direction of people who are heading towards seek volunteer. And so one of the things that we've certainly said to the FreddyMatch team is we'd love the development pathway to include that API, which kind of works in that space to show those two alternatives. But it's going to effectively pull people through different journeys and pathways so that they land in different areas. And our goal is that they really don't. Our goal is not that they don't go to Victor. Our goal is that they have a better experience, which is around their interest, their appetite, their motivation, their speed, their pace, and that they can select things out. They can select things out really, really easy. If you go down the pathway, there's a significant change journey, I think, that you have to be able to commit to, and that is really embracing, I think, what the platform brings to you. So I'm a big fan of looking at IT products and trying to implement them as they come off the shelf, because my personal view is those products as they come off the shelf, they should be just about the best that product can be before you start to manipulate it and interfere with it. And I've seen many projects where we think we're doing something to improve it, but we undo it. So, one of our recommendations is, if you're looking at this, is to look at those sort of features of different systems. And here it's with this platform, it's that idea of, following those lessons around authentic imagery, following the lessons around how we label roles, following those lessons around how the wording fits in terms of those sort of first few moments of engagement to try and see where that goes, and being willing to potentially turn the processes that you have as a VRC not really on their head, but slightly on their head, so that you can get the best out of the system. If you're interested in this but not willing to make the changes, then I think you're going to end up with a clash between your internal culture and what this potentially can deliver. And it would be at the cost of what the volunteer experience is as they journey through there, if that's okay. I did see a question just pop up there from.
Yes, we do have a question, Brad. So Tony has asked, who checks the language, image, authenticity of the role when it appears on your website? Do you want to field that from your perspective? I can always give a FreddyMatch perspective afterwards if needed.
Yeah, no. So I think part of the onboarding piece, we certainly had some handholding from Roxanne and the team as we started this up, Tony, and the end point that we're trying to get to really as a FreddyMatch Manager user is to make sure that as a VRC that we're trying to coach the VIOs to be able to do that well. So it gives us that chance, I guess, to show our insight and our skill base back to them using that without necessarily always having to lean into Roxanne and the team. But there's certainly been occasions where we've had to go and lean in that way to get some support, and that's worked pretty seamlessly. Is there anything I've missed there, Roxanne?
No, I don't think so, Brad. We have different approaches for different organisations, but Tony, did you have any further questions on that?
Yeah, thank you. Because we've got a similar database, but always looking to see if I can enhance it. When we first, we had a two-level matching tool, I guess. The organisation, the VIO, could actually come in, has partial access, or did have partial access to the back end of our database, where they could at any time either upload a new role or, either expand or withdraw a current role. So it was that point in time management that we were looking at.
Yep.
Just so that it kept current rather than, I suppose, from our point of view, as people say, having to follow up with organisations to find out what the current status of that role was, when we made those referrals. I was wondering if that's, let me come back to it. The problem was that how far do you let the VIOs into your database, or is it a platform that just allows people to, I suppose, access onto your website, as opposed to into the back end of your database? That was all.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I've explained that properly, but it got to a point where what was the level of security and when you let people into the back end of your database to make those currencies. But I'm not sure, Ben, Roxanne, if this platform actually does that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer from a general perspective, Tony, and then Brad can answer from a Volunteering Gold Coast specific perspective. So on FreddyMatch, all VIOs have the power to add, well, first of all, they can create their own organisational profile, and they can also list volunteer roles. Now, on FreddyMatch, when a new organisation lists their profile, we as a team go through a checking process and we verify that the organisation are who they say they are, in a very light touch way, but there's still, an element of oversight. And we also, of course, check to make sure that they're not a duplicate organisation. Beyond that, and when an organisation, a VIO, lists a volunteer role, it is only in draft status until it is approved by a member of the FreddyMatch team. And that approval process is simply that there's no inappropriate images, inappropriate language, and that the role roughly adheres to our standards in terms of volunteer role. Now, Volunteering Gold Coast have some overlay processes on that, and Brad, I'll just let you talk through those. But hopefully, Tony, that's enough from our perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brad, before you start, I was just saying that's the similar process where a member VIO would be notified that they've gone to the back end. They would hit submit. That would then trigger an email or a flag to myself and to two other members of the team. We would then investigate that role or that activity or that update just to decide that it was appropriate. And then once we approved it, it would then go up onto our website or into our database. So that oversight's what you guys do now, which is great. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so the team here are really strong at trying to provide some support to our VIO members. And you heard me sort of talk about before that, we haven't really cut back the size of the team. We're just kind of redirecting that value add or benefit sort of creation effort from the time that's been released. Not because of the status of funding of VRCs, but as a general comment from me, one of the things that I really like about the platform here is that we're bringing VIOs on a journey, which is and I hope it's not the case, if Volunteering Gold Coast didn't exist, we want to make sure that everyone's actually left with more skills and capability to be able to manage this by themselves if they had to. And that's about ensuring then that volunteering survives in one shape or another. So it sounds very pessimistic. It's not meant to be pessimistic. It's more just around sort of contingency planning and helping VIOs to become, the people are able to serve themselves as much as they can. There's a range of activities from VIOs. I mean, there are VIOs who are very, very capable of jumping into this space, I'm sure, which is your experience, Tony, and manage those things really well behind the scenes. And there are others that certainly need an awful lot of hand-holding, and there are others that need to be reined right in to make sure that the experience that they're putting up is consistent with how we believe that volunteers should be supported, right? So 99% of the time people are focused on doing the right thing. There's a bunch of people who might want to try and break away from that and do something a little bit differently. So yes, there's some wriggle room, but we want to make sure that most of the things are consistently put out there. There's a couple of other challenges with VIOs that have, multiple outlets. And often these are just their own internal processes. So if you work with organisations that have, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 outlets, but they want to have one membership, the flow of information here goes back to a single point, and often those organisations might choose to have an internal process which is trying to then get it directed somewhere immediately to one of their sites rather than going through a central piece. There are a few things that are worthwhile working with your VIOs up front to make sure that they understand what that flow looks like, how they make those choices. And in some cases, we've simply set up multiple instances of, volunteering Gold Coast Site A, volunteering Gold Coast Site B, Site C, and run a membership model with them where, we'll charge an overarching membership piece and then something for each of the sites just to reflect the different effort that kind of goes into that space.
Brad, I think we've got a question from Diane and a question from Mel.
Yeah, look, you may have just sort of touched on what I was going to ask, but I suppose it was like, Brad, whether you're still running a membership program.
Yep, we are.
Yeah. And do you charge for that membership program?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay. And so, like, on a day-to-day basis, is Volunteering Gold Coast involved in writing and uploading these positions?
Yes, so we as a VRC, we still offer that support and service to members if they want that. The big goal here is really for VIOs to become self-sufficient and become competent at doing it, but we will certainly look at lifting those things as much as we can. I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, on the journey into the platform, we certainly lent in on some of the expertise that Roxanne and her team had around a lot of that Google Analytics and insights around web users as to what that structure needed to look like to be able to come in. So that's meant that we've had to change the way we were writing things as well. So a bit of a learning there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mel.
Yes. My question follows on from what you were talking about as well. So for other VRCs on the call, we are in the process of adopting this, right bang in the middle of it now, and doing all the data transfer from Victor onto FreddyMatch. So just in terms of the this kind of idea of multiple outlets, that is a question that's come up from one of our members, and we're kind of preempting that it might be a question from others. So for us particularly, a good example would be local council, that we've got one of the biggest council in South Australia here that has 32 volunteer programs. And another local council as well that has about 10. One of them will probably be happy for everything to go through them as an internal thing. The other one has asked about multiple logins, so program managers can actually update their own role. And I just wondered if you'd had any organisations and how you've managed that.
Yeah, I might go first and then let Roxanne come in to talk more broadly than how we've done it. If I pick up on Diane's comment and question about how are we charging for membership and things like that, the first thing I would say is where we're providing an additional level of service, my view is we should feel really proud to actually put an invoice to that and send it through to people and say, look, we're providing you with a benefit. We're going to do this really well, but it doesn't come for free in that space. I'd say, Mel, it's probably worthwhile outside of this presentation potentially connecting up and having maybe a three-way conversation with Roxanne and myself to go, well, what has those different experiences and models look like, to kind of get into some of the details of it. But we've just been transparent with people saying there's different ways in which the software can work and the flexibility. If we're creating multiple pathways for it to go to different areas, it's obviously got more setup. It's got a little bit more effort that needs to go into it, and therefore the pricing that we charge under our membership model gets passed on in that way. But Roxanne, FreddyMatch touches so many other regions than just the Gold Coast, and different organisations will set it up in a different way. So I might hand it back to you, Roxanne, just to talk about that variation.
Yeah, sure. So what you're not seeing from this view is that obviously every VIO has their own little login into FreddyMatch, and again, that would be the subject of a demo. But the back end, in inverted commas, is a really kind of, I suppose, an attractive and easy to use portal. Now, at that VIO kind of, entry level, that is what most VIOs who come through a volunteering resource centre use. But we also have what we call is a managed agency model, where a large organisation such as Vinnie's can have essentially access to something that looks pretty similar to what Brad would see if he logged in here. And that is a dashboard. They can see all their different locations underneath it. And then they can have a kind of a main manager who then refers people to each of the sub-programs. That is useful for councils as well. Now, that is obviously somewhat different to the standard FreddyMatch offering, so we do tend to encourage you to price that slightly differently. But that's a discussion when you're kind of, I suppose, in the process of onboarding. And Mel, we can talk a little bit more about that and talk about the individual councils and the like who've come through and want to have that discussion. So that's, I suppose this is another advantage of FreddyMatch, is that we are able to respond to what you need and set up the platform in a way that suits you, hence this newish model. Anyway, hopefully that helps and answers a few questions.
That's good. Thanks.
Yeah, the other thing I'd just reiterate is, Roxanne and the team have been really, really accessible. We had the benefit, I guess, of being early adopters and being able to shape some of these things together, and I'm big on you want to pick partners who have a really strong matching ideology, not just picking partners because pricing or security wise they kind of tick the box. You want to, in our world, we want to think, where does this platform go over the next 5 to 10 years? Is that aligned with the journey that we want to take? And I guess from our point of view, we see that self-service pathway being a really strong experience that is here nested in our website and therefore reflective of our brand. That's part of the reason why we want to go down that pathway. And over the last 12 months, we've seen just over 9,000 unique users come and engage with our version of FreddyMatch in terms of looking for referrals. Now that 9,000 users, that's 9,000 unique users. That's far bigger than the 6,000 users that we were seeing when we were face-to-face predominant service as a VRC. So that's 9,000 coming through that space, plus the others that are coming through our doors and through the other pathways. But many of these 9,000 people will end up coming in if they want, if this is part of their journey and part of their choice, will come in and have a conversation or a discussion or a touch point with us. But many of them will go straight through to the VIO and be managed very successfully in that pathway. Are there any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah. Hi, Brad. It's Sue in WA.
Hey, Sue.
Can you just give us a bit of an overview of what types of reports you can pull from FreddyMatch? So for statistics and for funding and things like that?
I might give Roxanne a little bit of a chance maybe to pull up her, whether you want to show a dashboard or something like that for you, Roxanne. The team that deal with this, there's a team that deal with this more often than I do. I often see their reporting stats come out in their monthly reports through to me rather than playing in it every day. So the reporting is quite strong and useful in terms of understanding who's pulling through, the numbers of opportunities, the length of time opportunities have been up there, all the sorts of things that you would expect to happen. But it's also great in terms of looking at things that have not necessarily been followed up or are outstanding. But Roxanne will be far more closer to the dashboard elements than I will be. So I might let you speak to that, Roxanne.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for the question. So again, I'm not going to go into the demo side of things today, but one of our key kind of features is that all the information on FreddyMatch is available to download as CSV. at any time. So every single page has a export to CSV function at the top of it. So you can always export a list of volunteers and all their details, a list of VIOs and all their details, a list of applications and all the details. Any element that you want from the platform, you can immediately download as a CSV. So that just enables like on the fly reporting without asking us to provide you with a data extract. It is all there for you at any time. And other than that, we provide fully customizable reporting. So the dashboard has certain widgets on it that show different things, and you can switch those in or out depending on the needs of your organization. So we do, for Volunteering Gold Coast, it's a lot about application flow, application status, things that are outstanding and need attention. And then I believe that the team does a lot of the other stuff through customized CSV reports. But different organizations are different, and I'm really happy to talk to you about your specific needs. But yeah, does that help a little bit?
Yeah, it does help. I'm assuming, well, I have assumed that a lot of the reports could also be the same as what we now would get out of Victor. Would that be right, Brad?
Yeah, we certainly didn't lose anything in terms of the broad functionality that Victor have. One of the bits I know that our team really like is, because we are doing a paid membership model, is being able to go and get that data from that CSV export for each of the VIOs. And if, for example, we're sending a renewal through to the Nerang Neighbourhood Centre here, for example, we can go through, have a look at that data, set it for a date range, and be able to say to them, hey, we're asking you to renew, and here's an example of here's the performance that we've seen for your roles and things like that. So, it makes it a lot easier to be prepped to be able to go and have conversations with VIOs, to talk about where they're performing, to be able to look at all of your data and compare that to an average, and potentially to engage them in conversations around change. So if we're asking you to update your imagery, for those organisations that have got updated imagery, they tend to have better averages and the likes of that. So really useful, not just bite-sized piece of information, but quality information to be able to go and support and have some good conversations.
So just one last question, if I could, probably for Roxanne, I'm not really sure. If a person was to choose to go from Victor to FreddyMatch, how would you transfer your data across? Is there a simplistic way, or is that something that we have to start from scratch?
So there is a simple way, simple-ish. So we can get whatever you can manually export from Victor, and we can automatically import that to FreddyMatch. There are always some data cleansing issues, but by and large, the team will support you through that process. Mel is probably the most likely here to be able to give you an answer to that, because she is in the throes of that process. So I might give you a real user's impression, Mel.
Yeah, we've, to date, just found it brilliant. We've had to run a simple report out of Victor. I have to say Volunteering WA weren't particularly helpful, so a bit of a contrast to Brad's experience in terms of getting that data out. But we worked with the team and just said, look, this is, and as I'm saying we, the royal we, me, because we're down on staff, I said, this is all I can actually pull out of Victor. Can you work with it? And they've just done the rest. So completely stress-free from my point of view. It's, I think probably for us, we've done it in stages. So I gave Roxanne and the team the organisation data first. So that was all loaded. Then we sent an email to the organisations to say it's there, you need to activate your FreddyMatch account. Then last week, or a couple of weeks ago, I pulled out the position data from Victor, gave that to the FreddyMatch team. They've loaded all that. So literally this afternoon, I'll be sending another email to the organisations to say all the positions are up there now. You need to log in and activate your account. So for me, I think probably the work's going to come in bringing the organisations along on the journey. The data transfer's just been a nothing in comparison, really. And I think it's just going to be that stuff that Brad talked about showing them how the platform works. You know, it's something new, and people have to be encouraged to try it out and use it. Having said that, we've already had a number of organisations have activated their accounts. I've got emails from other organisations saying when are the positions going up, who are, you know, really eager to get running with it. So I think it'll be a mixed experience with the VIOs, but yeah, in terms of the data, it was press a button, get the information exported to a spreadsheet out of Victor, and Roxanne and the team have done the rest. So
yeah, I think it's I don't want to be naive and say to everyone it's a really simple process. It's a process that you need to be really clear about what the steps are and being able to take VIOs through, because you know, this is a real accountability and opportunity for VRCs to show a leadership position around supporting those organisations to be able to make a change, to be not just brave, but to be committed to trying to have a better volunteering experience in that sense.
I think my mic is off, sorry. I didn't know if I muted myself. I think as well for us, which might be interesting for some of the other VRCs, is we have used the funding through the Peabody to get this up and running as a pilot. Peabody in South Australia is pretty much sold on FreddyMatch as well, so we're actually using that funding through the Peabody to pilot this with organisations. So yeah, bit different in terms of you know, funding it, if you like.
Thank you. Thanks, Mel, and thanks, Brad, as well. And in the remaining 1 minute, I just wanted to pop on the screen some options for next steps. So feel free to get in contact with me directly. I will send my email address, or I'll send you all an email after the call. But you can book a demo and explore the platform in more detail. And we do actually have a special offer on at the moment. So if you if you're really eager to get going quickly and you sign up within the next month, you get 3 whole months for free, which is great. I did have a question in the chat about how much it costs. The simple answer to that is it starts at $250 a month, but it depends on how many programs you're running. So I just have to touch base with you individually on that. I think that question came from Tanya. So yeah, I can hang around for a minute, Tanya, and you can always ask me some more questions if you like. And we also have what we call our volunteer success promise. So we say that if you do not see a positive impact in 6 months, we will offer you a full refund on the platform because, yeah, really, truly, that's what we're all about, is helping you get more volunteers and continue to do the fantastic jobs you're all doing. So I do hope to hear from you all again, but if not, keep up the good work. You're all so important to the sector. And although the current climate might not reflect that, it is the truth. So please keep going. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to some of you soon. And thanks so much for listening.
Thanks everyone for giving your time.